And I'm Chuck Bass doesn't count.
Because you don't want to.
Not good enough.
Because I don't want you to.
It's not enough.
What else is there?
The true reason I should stay right where I am and not get in the car. 3 words. 8 letters. Say it, and I'm yours.
I
Thank you. That's all I needed to hear.
Blair and Chuck's relationship was one of the most compelling yet difficult relationships to witness on teen television. 1 minute they were on and the next minute they were off. Their relationship was dark, volatile, and filled with pain, betrayal, and disappointment. I believe their relationship to be the perfect representation of waiting for an avoidant man to finally open his heart up and commit. I have covered part 1 of Chuck's psychology in the previous video, and now I will be analyzing his attachment to Blair and naturally Blair's attachment to Chuck and why these two got our hearts racing in the show. Viewers wanted them together so badly, but Chuck always found a way to break Blair's trust and push her away. So in this video, we will be analyzing precisely why these two were drawn to each other, and why Chuck sabotaged their relationship so many times, and why Blair still loved him after all the pain he's caused her. So as you can see from the clip I just showed you, Chuck deeply struggles with vulnerability and telling Blair how he truly feels. It wasn't the first time that he had humiliated Blair, abandoned her, or disappointed her in the show. Chuck had a bit of a habit of aggressively pursuing Blair for a moment and then suddenly switching up on her and becoming emotionally unavailable. At times, when Blair would gather the courage to open up to him and lay her feelings bare, he would find a way to weaponize it against her and leave her heartbroken. Now let's dive into Chuck's psychology some more and unpack why he was so drawn to Blair yet sabotaged their connection repeatedly. So I believe that Chuck was deeply in love with Blair because she truly saw him beyond the wealth, arrogance, and hyper-independence. I believe that Blair saw the emotionally deprived little boy in Chuck and she saw his potential and believed that he could be a better human being. So that kind of attention, in my opinion, and that kind of validation was secretly very appealing to Chuck as he had never gotten that from his father or his mother, who was never in the picture. Another important factor is that Blair did not relate to Chuck through his money, power, or access. She mainly related to Chuck in a psychological and emotional way. Blair activated Chuck's attachment system, hence his pull toward her, yet his reluctance to fully surrender to her as he had never done that before. It was a very scary feeling for him because he had internalized that he was either unlovable or only loved through his status or economic power. It's almost like Blair made Chuck feel like she'd still love him even if the name Bass wasn't attached to him. Now you may ask yourself, then what was Chuck's problem if he knew deep down that Blair loved him for him despite his obvious flaws? Why did he keep pushing her away? And I think that this is when we can truly dive into the psychology of the dismissive avoidant and how much our parents, who happen to be our first loves in life, can truly do a number on us. So remember in part 1 of Chuck's analysis, I covered his relationship with his father, Bart Bass, and I unpacked his daddy issues. Bart was in many cases an active participant in the demise of Chuck and Blair's relationship, in my opinion. He would often discourage Chuck from opening his heart up to Blair and used Blair to strip Chuck out of his masculinity and would call him soft and weak for simply considering Blair's feelings. So even when Chuck had moments in the show where he'd want to follow his heart, his father was right there to pull him back into the darkness and reinforce his avoidant tendencies, essentially. So it's not impossible for an avoidant man to change their ways and open their heart up, but we also have to keep in mind that internal working models don't change from insight alone or exposure to real love. I'm going to quickly break down the concept of internal working models and hope that it's going to help viewers understand avoidant tendencies and characters and perhaps the avoidance in their lives. So this is for educational purposes. You can do with this information what you want. So, internal working models are basically our beliefs about relationships, people, and the concepts of love and trust. They can be difficult to reverse because they are formed in infancy, which means that they are encoded in us pre-verbally. So, they are encoded as expectations, bodily reactions, and emotional reflexes. So, it's extremely difficult to think your way out of something you never thought your way into. So, what is sad about this deeply psychological process is that because the brain prioritizes prediction and familiarity over truth, the nervous system resists ambiguity and uncertainty and emotional disorganization. And lastly, what I want to say about internal working models is that they are unconsciously self reinforcing, as individuals tend to select partners who confirm their model. They tend to interpret ambiguity through their model and behave in ways that evoke expected responses. Now, this brings us to Blair and why she was so drawn to Chuck. So remember that Blair also carries attachment wounds despite her being emotionally braver than Chuck at times. As I covered in previous videos, I believe that Blair's attachment issues were primarily coming from the relationship with her mom. In a way, Chuck mirrors Blair's internal world because just like Eleanor Waldorf, he is emotionally unavailable and he withholds affection. He's also unpredictable when you get too close and can be loving but simultaneously unsafe. This feels familiar to Blair because it recreates her earlier attachment environment. The only difference is that this time she hopes that it's gonna be different. That's why we've witnessed Blair fighting for Chuck after major setbacks, going back to him and supporting him in ways that were sometimes very maternal. Some viewers may have seen Blair as masochistic, but this was more so repetition compulsion, not masochism. Chuck offered Blair something her mother never offered her, which is basically him being able to see Blair's mind and intensity. He also matched her ambition and intelligence, and he recognized Blair's hunger for power. Eleanor, for the most part, valued Blair's image as she saw Blair as an extension of herself. So Chuck seeing Blair for who she was made him uniquely validating, in my opinion. Those of you who know a little bit about psychology might ask yourselves if Blair and Chuck were then in a trauma bond. And in my opinion, the answer is yes. Chuck and Blair shared secrecy, schemes, emotional arousal, rupture and repair cycles, and betrayal followed by longing. This, in my opinion, creates a trauma bond where pain increases attachment and unpredictability heightens desire, and intermittent reinforcement strengthens obsession. So these two weren't just in love, they were addicted to a familiar yet unhealthy intensity. Lastly, I think it is also important to keep in mind that because of Eleanor's influence, Blair's identity was formed around exceptionalism, being chosen, and being irreplaceable. This means that Chuck, i.e. the man who needs no one and resisted love and commitment, became the ultimate prize for a girl like Blair. In other words, if she can make him choose love, it confirms her specialness, her worth, and her lovability. This was perhaps very seductive to Blair, yet undeniably dangerous for her mental health. So in conclusion, both Blair and Chuck were drawn to each other because they saw each other, but also because they were trying to repair what I call an earlier attachment wound. Blair believed love required endurance, and Chuck believed love required power plays and manipulation. This made for a compelling yet destructive union.